All right, welcome back, everyone. So I was trying to get the dean to view my research as important. And because writing in law reviews is very different than what is done at a typical business school, me constantly telling him that I was a great researcher was falling on deaf ears. How do I increase my leverage, my credibility at the table, if me saying I was great, which I was not enough? Do a field analysis. When Carrie joined and formed a partnership with the University of Maryland's law school, I then invited the dean over. So now we have one dean talking to another dean, which is far more impressive than an untenured professor trying to sell you on how great they are. Invited them over for a paper talk. I did a paper talk and had the dean whisper into my dean's ear, hey, you know, her research doesn't suck. Actually, they said a little more than that because I'd had a conversation with the dean ahead of time, letting him know, you know, I just don't know if business schools value legal scholarship. And I'm really interested in revamping how that's viewed at the business school. A number of our faculty have joint appointments at the law school, and I really worry about future collaboration efforts if law research is not seen to be at least on par with what business schools are cranking out. By looking beyond the person I was negotiating with, the dean, to who's in the stands, who's in the sidelines, who has a more effective voice with my dean than I do, who can advance my cause more, I created the situation. The dean whispered into my dean's ear, and suddenly, lo and behold, my research no longer sucked, which was nice. So when you prepare for negotiations, by the time you sit down with the person you're negotiating with, 70 to 80% of the work needs to have been done. What's your opposition all about? What did my dean value? Quant stuff. I'm not a quant person. How do I disabuse him of that idea? Who's on the sidelines? Who's in the stands? And what context? Meaning the context of a newly formed relationship between the business school and the law school. How could I use these things to advance my cause? So I very much encourage you, outside of just the planning document, to consider sidelines, stands, context. Are there political issues? Are there indirect actors? Are there board members? Are there people that you can leverage that have more influence, more credibility, more history to affect the change that you want within the person that's going to be sitting across from you than you can on your own? So again, I really encourage you to make a field analysis part of your negotiation. All right, a little more on coalitions. Now, coalitions are not partnerships. Coalitions are, you hang out with people because you have a shared purpose. And for this one moment in time, I may not like you personally, but for this moment in time, yeah, this makes a ton of sense. So when we talk about coalitions, there are different buckets of people, and it is worth your while when you're thinking about forming a coalition to understand what that person represents. Are they a bedfellow? Are they a fence sitter? Are they an adversary, opponent, or ally? And on this block trust agreement matrix, you see where they fall in terms of agreement and trust. And I'm sure there would be an excellent political or current situation that I could use that would fully walk through all of this. However, I'm not gonna. We'll just stick with this. All right, so these are your buckets. And there are different strategies that are involved with all 5 of these groups of people. So I would not want you to come up with the idea, oh my gosh, I don't agree with anything that Debbie says. So yeah, she's going to be at this meeting. I'm just going to ignore her. I do not agree with her whatsoever. I want you to fight that natural inclination. And I hope that by giving you strategies for engaging with all of these people, that you will form more robust field analysis and strengthen your positions even more before you sit down for that actual negotiation. So what does it look like? All right, allies. Woohoo! We love allies. It's like us and generally Canada. Shared vision, you have slightly different perspectives on things, but what you like about allies is high trust, high agreement. But they offer a slightly different perspective, so it might help you expand your awareness of possible issues. But they are an added, though slightly different perspective on where you want to go. With them, because you trust them, it is really okay to share some of your fears and vulnerabilities. And that goes back to just basic integrative strategies. With integrative negotiations, again, it's like when I walk over to public health and these people just make me want to hug them. You want to disclose a little bit about yourself to have trust flourish. You want their advice, you want their support. It makes sure that you validate and strengthen the relationship. So allies are cool. There's really no rocket science there. Opponents, just in case you forgot, opponents, low agreement, high trust. I'm an attorney. And the opponents would be, if I'm a plaintiff's attorney, they're the defense attorney. I do not agree with them. We have a different take on the law, but we both trust each other. And going back to if I was preparing for a trial, I would always bring in a straw person, they would take the opposing side. What you like about opponents is, while you fundamentally disagree, you value, respect, and trust their opinion. You don't agree with it, but you trust it. And what this does is it gives you trusted feedback and real insight into filling out the right-hand column of the planning document. What are the other side's interests? What might their perspectives be? What might be their hopes, their fears, their interests? So in dealing with opponents, affirm, dude, I trust you a lot. I respect you. I do not agree with you, but what I'd like from you is to help me engage in a problem-solving conversation. I've told you my point of view, you've told me yours. Is there any commonality we can find here to create a third story where we meet both of our interests? So again, opponents are good. You trust them, you just don't agree with them. Oh, bedfellows. Yeah, bedfellows, at the moment, I really agree with you, but guess what? I do not trust you. I don't even like you. But for this moment in time, our interests are aligned. Tough thing with them. What do they provide? They provide more people or more support on your side. However, this is not a partnership. This is a coalition. And if they are given a better offer, they could leave you high and dry. Also, if I see two people hanging out together in a negotiation that should not be hanging out together, I know that AJ and Benson can't stand each other. What are they doing hanging out together? If I walk into a negotiation and that's the case, holy cow, my goal is to drive a wedge between them and break up that coalition. So there is a risk of a divided front. Questionable security, because again, if given a better option, one or both of you could leave. So other than providing high agreement on this one issue, what is your strategy for dealing with them? I really go back to clarity and some amount of trust or honesty. So, dude, here are my expectations. I know, Betsy, that if you're given another option, you may take it. And all things being equal, I may take it too. I know I'm very clear on what your position is. And I know that you will pursue fulfilling that position as aggressively as you can, as will I. What I do ask is that we check in with each other periodically. We need to affirm what we agree on and what our goals are. And be honest. I'm a little nervous, Betsy, because you look nice, but you could like dump me in a heartbeat. And that'd make me a little nervous. Negotiate the conditions of your relationship. And if I'm working with a bedfellow in a group negotiation, I will purposely have times throughout the negotiation where we have a sidebar. We leave the group. Hey, are we still on track? Is this a perspective or a strategy that works for you? So frequent check-ins with them. What's tough with bedfellows is while there's high agreement, there's low trust. So really working on being clear in your expectations before you begin is critical. Fence sitters. Holy cow, talk about a waste of time. Fence sitters are like undecideds in an election. They just sit there. For the most part, you know all the information that you're going to know. But for whatever reason, these people are not going to make a decision until the last minute. What people have a tendency to do is to shower an inordinate amount of time and resources trying to get them on their side. Of all the 5 boxes, spend your time elsewhere. Fence sitters are fence sitters for a reason. And to waste resources and time on them, they're worth one conversation. Is there anything I can give you? No, I'm still really thinking things over. Well, there's no new information. So let them cogitate on their own. Do not fall into the trap of sinking resources into trying to convince fence sitters. Adversaries. Woo! Adversaries are tough. Adversaries. Low trust, low agreement. Yeah. So what do you do with adversaries? Adversaries are, and if you've done a really good job with your field analysis, with adversaries, I may not be the person to approach you. So if I have to deal with an adversary, I'm going to do it in one of 2 ways. One, is there someone in the stands, on the sideline, a regulatory body, public opinion, a friend that you have? Is there someone that I know that has influence over you, or someone that a trusted ear that you would listen to? If so, I'm going to seek them out and see if they would help me. If I don't know anyone, my best strategy would be, hey, here's the deal. You don't like me, I like you, but you made it clear you don't like me. Do not tank me on this deal. So the only thing that I'm asking for is that you not screw this up for me. In exchange for, think concession, I know you want X in 6 months. I'll sit on my hands and not say anything. So a strategy may be, listen, all I'm asking for is don't tank this deal for me. If you don't tank it for me on this, whatever this might be, that's of import to them, I won't tank you on. Does this always work? Of course not. If so, there probably wouldn't be adversaries. However, I encourage you, rather than sheer avoidance, to think through your relationship with your adversaries. Is there an intermediary that you can use that has more sway with them? Is there something that you know they want in the future that if they help you out here and I still don't like you, and I would set it up as a concession, I know that you want to eliminate blah, 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 that's going to cost me. And you know that I fought you on this on the past. However, this is important enough to me that you help me out here, I'll let that go. And the lawyer side of me would want this in writing and probably extract a pound of flesh too. Whatever will make you comfortable. All right, so before we get into, and these are like my favorite, like 3 slides coming up. I want to just recap what we've gone through. We talked about, in terms of preparing for a negotiation, the planning document. And yes, the planning document is incredibly important, whether it's a distributive or an integrative negotiation. And that forces you to walk through with clarity what your position and interests are, the costs associated with, and to break it down in terms of target price and reservation price, and to look at your plan B. It also requires you to do that, step into the shoes of the other person and do that same thing. And to the extent that you've made assumptions, it forces you to identify them as such and begin crafting questions that will allow you to test those assumptions. That's basic negotiation 101. The next stage that I think is very important is the field analysis, and that expands your view from just focusing on the person who's going to be physically sitting across from you. What's the context? Who are people on the sidelines? Who are bystanders? What are regulatory agencies or public or other things that you can leverage that can increase the effectiveness of your position? So I very much encourage you to do that. Also, as you go through the field analysis, allies, bedfellows, opponents, adversaries, fence sitters will naturally come up. Rather than writing these folks off or gravitating only to an ally, I've attempted to provide you both a snapshot of what these various groups provide you in a negotiation, but also strategies for engaging them within the negotiation. So I encourage you to expand your negotiation preparation to include planning documents, field analysis, and being open to leveraging groups or coalitions outside of just allies. All right. All that being said, what's left? Woohoo! Managing the complexity of a negotiation. And holy cow, do I love this. Well, the slide itself is not all that attractive, but I like the information. You're like, what? It's blank. Wait for it. Boom. All right. So in two-party negotiations, and I just want to give this first. Two-party negotiations, especially for distributive negotiations, we've talked about the importance of making the first offer because that anchors the negotiation. When you're negotiating with multiple people, don't make the first offer, move first. What do you mean by that? Have either your agenda or your proposal be introduced first. And why is that important? It's important because whether we like it or not, it becomes the litmus test by which all other ideas are measured. And if you go back to what I said before, the importance of what do you do if someone makes an outrageous first offer? And the only wrong answer would be have them explain it. Because the more airtime this bad idea takes, the more you buy into, yeah, this is worth talking about. Well, once you enter into my realm of crazy, you will never win. When you're dealing with multiple people, if you get your proposal out first, it takes up the most airtime. And in multi-party negotiations, airtime matters. So if I'm saying, Betsy's proposal was the dumbest proposal ever. She's saying we should do this, we should do that. Okay, Betsy's like, cool. You can tear it apart all you want. But guess whose proposal is still controlling the narrative? The framing of the issues, whether you disagree or agree with the conclusions that she reached, her framing of the issues is taking center stage. So in multi-party negotiations, get a proposal out there first. All right. Now, and this is very important to me because, again, legal department, well, we don't have departments, but legal department at Cary, very, very small. In faculty meetings, if we were talking about dealing with resources or funding, I love to manage the process. And this becomes very important whether you're negotiating with difficult people or multiple people. If someone is a jerk in a half an hour, I'm not going to do what probably years of therapy could not undo. If you're a jerk at the beginning of the negotiation, you'll probably be a jerk at the end of the negotiation. I can't manage that. What I can, however, do is manage the process. So if, for example, we were having a conversation about, oh, let's see, we've had a huge pandemic and we are going to have to make cuts in our department. How are we going to make those cuts? The first thing that I'm going to talk about is what value are we going to use? What is the lens or the rubric that we are going to use for making these cuts? Are we going to be mindful of equity, equality, or need? Now, what I love about this, especially if you haven't taken a negotiations course, these things sound so noble, so ethical that you'd be a real jerk to say, no, we can't go with equality. So depending on where I am in the situation, I will espouse, listen, what we're really talking about is we want an equal number of cuts across all the departments. Or if we're talking about funding, and I always do this, if we're talking about funding, each department should get the same amount. Well, our finance department has like 50 people in it. The legal department has like me. I very much like the concept of everybody getting the same amount. Anyway, give some real thought. What, in terms of the framework or the value, and Hopkins is a value-rich institution, what value are we going to use in either addressing this crisis, making budget cuts, or framing how we deliver classes in the future? Equity, equality, or need? Now, once we've identified the value through which we will make decisions, let's talk about decision-making rules. Are we going to, dictatorship, not touching that, but there's some examples we could use here of perhaps a dictator type of approach to decision-making. But are we going to use dictator, majority, supermajority, consensus, or precedent? That is very important. And depending on the result that I want, I will opt for other things. So people have a tendency to say, okay, let's go with consensus. So what does consensus mean? How is consensus different from majority or supermajority? Is consensus 100%? Is it 51%? What is consensus? So don't let, in terms of decision-making, a word dominate the decision-making process, or if we say equality or equity or need, what do those words mean to the other side? And I really like to get ahead of this because I'm a lawyer and I like thinking about words. I not only think of the word, I have a definition ready. Now, if it's a decision that I don't want us to get to, I might say, hey, listen, if we're going to go all online for the rest of 2020, I think there needs to be a consensus among faculty. And for us to be able to sell it to students, consensus should mean every single faculty member is on board. That way, Cary has a united front end from our collective opinion. Everyone down to the last faculty member feels this is the best way to deliver your pedagogical experience for the next 3 months. Because I know AJ is such a curmudgeon and will never agree to this, I know we'll never get a unanimous agreement. So I've offered something that on its face makes sense, a rationale that people could get behind, but AJ, because he hates me, would never vote for this, and I didn't really want to go all online anyway. Give some real thought to decision making. And again, oftentimes other people aren't thinking about it. So you thinking about it, you have the possibility of advancing your agenda with little interference. Voting. Do you want public or private? And that very much depends on, I know that Mark is on my side, but wow, adolescence was tough for him. He always caves to peer pressure. And if there is a public ballot, he will never side with me. I would then very much vote for private ballot. If he is allowed to write down his vote anonymously, Mark will do the right thing. So give some thought to that. So all three of these areas give you an opportunity to exert some leverage or influence over the process through which the deal will be negotiated. And depending on whether you have a lot of power or little power, there could be some ways within these buckets to elevate the opportunity or strength you bring to the negotiation. All right. Also, for coalitions in general or group negotiations, do not assume that everyone wants to get to an agreement. Sometimes the current chaos really makes a lot of sense, and I'm fine with it. Also, in a two-party negotiation, if you don't like what's going on and your BATNA is good enough, you can leave the table. In a group negotiation, guess what? You never get to leave. Because if you leave, guess where all of the cuts are coming from? Your department that is not represented. Facilitate being heard. When I talked about the importance of interests, it's important because you begin to find out what is important to the other side. To facilitate you being heard, you need to speak the language that allows you to rent space in someone else's brain. I am not a quant person. They make me break out in hives. So if you start to try and have a quantitative conversation with me, I will stop listening. What language, what data, how do I appeal to the other side? All of that facilitates being heard, the framing. So how do you frame a message? You want to always lock in on what are their core values. When I was talking about equality, equity, need, those are examples of core values through which you can identify with them in a very impactful way to influence the other side. Can I point to an example where your conduct is in conflict with your stated value? If I say I very much value a diverse and inclusive workforce, but my practices contradict that, that is something where I would go to open up the conversation. Not to get overly political, but Obama, holy cow, the man could not be brief if his life depended on it. Very long explanations, regardless of how you feel about Trump. He tapped into something with very short, very vivid, overly simplistic explanations. Lock her up, build that wall. I'm not going to get sidetracked. I'm going to continue with a vivid explanation that clearly displayed and tapped into, at least at that time, a feeling within parts of the country. So when I am explaining my point, what is a clear, concise statement of my position that's vivid, that will resonate with the other side? Words really, really matter, folks. Defund the police. These words resonate. So when you are preparing for a negotiation, yes, the Obama type explanation can come later to get me hooked. What's an easy way for me to get my head around what you're talking about? Once you framed the issue, you need to talk about persuasion. How can you do that? connect emotionally. If I feel that you honestly and authentically care about that, that allows me to establish credibility. How else do I establish credibility? Use language that resonates with you. When I'm giving a negotiation course to the School of Medicine, my examples need to use medical terminology. If I'm talking about things that happen in the ED, I need to use words that convey, I know what I'm talking about, that there is some common ground or shared experience that allows me to be a credible source for what I'm saying. When I talk to lawyers, I use wholly different explanations and a very different form of word choice because it allows me to double down on my credibility, which, depending on who you are, how you present, can be more needed for some groups than others. So pay attention to it. Quick strategy: explain before disagreeing. Folks, the human mind, especially with the internet now, with very short attention spans. We listen until we get the answer to our question. Once I understand the answer to your question, I no longer am listening. So my kids, Mom, can I have my phone? No. I could say, your dad and I are going to the moon. We're like having 20 other kids. They are not listening. The immediate answer to their question came in the no. When you're doing something, give your explanation first. I will stay engaged until I get the answer to my question. So if any of you folks are going for a job interview or asking for a raise, do not say, I'd like $80,000 and then give the explanation. I don't care about the explanation, and the explanation afterwards waters down the impact of you asking for the amount. Give the explanation first. I've done X, Y, and Z, and I want, boom, $80,000 or $800,000. Drop the mic, shut up, look confident. Explain before disagreeing, explain before asking. Acknowledgement. People like to feel heard and understood. It's important here. Acknowledgement is not the same as agreement, but it lets you know, though I do not agree with you, I hear what you were saying. Because if I don't feel that you've heard and understood me, I will keep repeating it over and over and over again. So it's not just, hey, yeah, I got that. That made an impression on me. I did not realize it had the effect of X, Y, and Z. You feeling better about this situation, it's important to me. So yeah, I get what you are saying. Or tell me more, because I really am trying to get my head around this. Acknowledgement. I call it the WD-40 of negotiations. It gets folks unstuck. And if there's a word that I could eliminate from the English language, it would be the word but. As soon as you give me a but, it gives me an excuse to stop listening or to stop trying to make a connection between the two. Yeah, I really like what you were saying, but boom, I've slammed into a brick wall. When you are discussing with someone, the word and is so powerful. Debbie, I hear you need 5 more FTEs, but we have to cut the budget. I'm like, oh, see, there's no way the two can connect. Debbie, I know you need 5 more FTEs and we have reductions to do. How can we make this work? As soon as you say and, it screws with our brain. We begin to lower cognitive resistance and try to see a way to link these two seemingly disparate terms. Take away but, it gives me an easy, lazy person's way out for not trying to find a way to meet both of these needs. All right, guys, hanging out with you for the past month has been fun, and stay safe. See ya.